Chapter 10. He has to die. You know the law. Tomorrow me and my Aunt Rapt will return for the boy. The words bounced around his skull as he backed away down the ramp. Farland stooped low to maneuver himself through the small doorway, taking care not to catch the pommel of his samaral that poked up behind his head from its harness on his back. He scanned the room, no suspicion or worry on his features. It seemed like habit. After backing up the full length of the main room, Cade bumped into the far wall. His mind raced. Not good. Very not good. He created and discarded plan after flawed plan, each feeling like they had a shot at working until a fraction of a second later, when he gave it the barest bit more thought. Run past him, up the ramp, into the woods. No, you tit. He's an Arnvart. You're not just going to run past him. Okay. Distract him and climb out the shutter. Cade briefly eyed one of the shutters, for barely a second. Farland saw it, though. As he looked at the shutter embedded into the wall on the far side of the room, and not at an accessible height, he smiled. The smile seemed to say, "Give it a shot." Cade discarded the thought before he got that far. Even if you made it outside, you're not outrunning an Arnvart. Right. Then I have to kill him. Arnvart, you tit. While Cade mentally twisted himself into knots, Farland picked up one of the sculptures on the shelves by the ramp and inspected it. You and your granddad lived here alone? How long? The question snapped Cade out of his internal bickering. Since I was little. He wasn't sure why he answered. Anything that wasn't his immediate murder seemed preferable, though. It's a lovely home. Lived in. Tells its own story. He set the sculpture back carefully where he had picked it up, even going so far as to adjust it to face the same way it had before. Haven't had a place to call home in a long time. Part of the job. You know what my job is, don't you, lad? Cade's breathing picked up. What was left to do? Please let me go. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I didn't know how. I never did it before. I'm supposed to end your kind, Farland replied. Strangely, he looked to be filled with his own grief. I've had to do it before. Not sure how many. Couldn't bring myself to start counting. Didn't want to know the number. I'll never do it again. I swear it, please. It killed killed. He couldn't finish it. He felt sick. The guilt was disgusting. The pleading brought knots to his stomach, begging for a life that he shouldn't even have. Let him do what you should have demanded he do, as soon as you knew what you were, coward. Where would you go? The question took him by surprise. I don't know. I guess I was going to Nearton. People know me. They give me work. I could stay in the inn and... Nope, Farland interrupted. The family I took to Nearton will talk. When news gets out about what happened, every town in the region will be visited by Aunt Rapt. Then I'd keep moving. I pass Nearton and get what I can carry, and I make it to the southern Fest City. Follow the road out to the east and make a new life in the... No, Farland interrupted again. The grief had given way to some other emotion. Cade couldn't place it, but the Arnvart seemed frustrated, more than grieved now. The Fest cities all have standing Arnrapt checkpoints, not to mention that many of the main roads have outposts that will have reeds. Cade didn't understand. What did it matter? Then I don't know what I'd do. I can hunt, sort of. He couldn't really. He'd gotten lucky with a bow and a handful of shots, but he'd easily missed 10 shots to every hit he'd ever landed. I'd stay away from the cities and try to make a place to live where no one could find me. He felt wrung out emotionally. Snapping at this man was not the right thing to do, but he couldn't help it. Live on your own, outside the protection of city walls. And if you met another Veer, could you defend yourself? Cade didn't reply. Could he? Somehow he had attacked Dahl with fire. He didn't understand how, though. Even if he did, would he use that? Never, Cade thought. Cade didn't have anything left. He just shrugged and slid down the wall. He hit the floor and drew his knees to his chest. Farlan let out a sigh and scrubbed a rough hand over his face. You asked what does it matter? Because it's not what we got told. Not what people all talk about. When you go to the academy, they talk about fighting monsters. Protecting your fellow man. Light in the darkness. No one said that you have to kill people. He went on under his breath, barely a whisper. Kill children. I won't kill a child, he said, almost to himself, eyes affixed on the ground but seeming to see much further. Cade wondered as he looked at the hulking man. Had he meant to say, I won't kill a child, again? Have you had this argument with yourself before? Have you lost it before? Cade thought. Farlan raised his eyes and met Cade's. He gritted his teeth and said, I won't hurt you. Cade felt like he had been punched. His mouth dropped and his eyebrows climbed into his hairline as a small puff of air escaped him. You're going to let me go? Farlan shook his head, but it wasn't a no. It seemed like he was shaking it at himself. Seems like if I do that, you'd just get yourself killed anyway. So I guess... His mouth formed a thin line as he huffed a sharp breath out of his nose, like he was trying to work himself towards something. So I guess I'll have to help you. Cade's eyebrows plummeted back down in a frown of confusion. Help me how? Well, I'm not sure. You come with me and we find my Aunt wrapped. She'll understand. He didn't seem at all convincing when he said it. She can help you hide what you are. Teach you to hide it, I mean. Why would you help me? He had said why, but Cade couldn't process it all. Was it a trap? He doesn't need to trap you, idiot. He could just squash you like a very unintelligent bug if he wanted. Farlan was now frowning in confusion himself. I just told... The deadpan expression he delivered was stunning in its sincerity. Then, as if he had read Cade's mind, You aren't too bright, are you? Having made up his mind, he seemed to be happier, and there was no venom to his words. It's true, Cade thought to himself. But to Farlan, he said, No, I'm not stupid. It's just... It's a lot to take in, okay? Farlan turned and started up the ramp. Well, yeah, he said as he went. If you're an idiot. But Cade could hear the smile in the words. So this one was brutal. So it took me like twice as long to record. I don't know why. I can't speak today, I guess. Anyway, yeah, so fairly happy with this chapter. Again, it's a reasonably small one. I noticed that there are some points where it incorporates dialogue that basically in this chapter it's probably the start of where I've used dialogue that's in a character's head more than I had previously, I guess. This is sort of in part, I guess, to try and get you in the character's head, not as in literally in the head, but just to have them expressing thoughts so that the reader is in their shoes, is probably a better way to put it, because obviously the dialogue is coming from in their head, but I need the reader to be sort of along for the ride with the characters, and so I think getting their internal dialogue is kind of important for some of those things. In a previous chapter, I spoke as well about this is the sort of thing that the perspective, it's hard to explain. The perspective I want to write from will be third person limited, and so you'll get the internal monologue of the character Cade, and you'll get information from as if an omnipotent being, but Cade is the person you're focusing on, so you only get his internal monologue, you don't get Farlan's, even though if in the next chapter, the chapter focused on, I mean, it probably won't ever focus on Farlan, but if it focused on him, you would then, you could get his internal monologue. So the being that is conveying this story, it's as if it's an omnipotent being, but you've only got one perspective at a time, which I think is really good. I like doing it that way. But yeah, going on from that is, there are some points where, like, when it starts, he has to die. You know the law. Tomorrow, me and my Aunt Rapt will return for the boy. The words bounced around his skull as he backed away down the ramp. It's not very clear initially, I suppose. Maybe this is only a problem when you're listening to it audibly, because in writing, most of the time anyone does internal dialogue, it's in italics. So So maybe this isn't an issue, but yeah, it was sort of hard to differentiate, I think, when I was reading it out. Might have to work on that a bit. I kind of like the bits where Cade's sort of like trying to come up with plans and he's like berating himself internally. I think that's kind of fun. He probably won't call himself a tit because that just seems weird coming from a kid, I think. Especially one that's like isolated, like tit it seems like a more colloquial insult, I guess, whereas like, idiot is a bit more general. So probably change those. But yeah, I like that there's also some, like, it fleshes out the idea of an Anvat. Like, there's a bit, again, when this bit was read, it didn't really flow very well, and I was aware that it was kind of silly, but when you look at it on the page, it's a bit clearer, where it's got, even if you make it outside, you're not outrunning an Anvat. New line. Right. New line. Then I have to kill him. New line. Anvat, you tit. And new line. And so it's sort of, the idea is that these are distinct thoughts that he's, has a thought, cross it off the list. Has a thought, cross it off the list. And it doesn't really come across very well when you just read them line for line, like audibly. But I think on the page, it looks quite funny, like, because you get to sort of see that, he's just established, I'm not outrunning an Anvat. And then he's like, well, my only option is to kill him. Like, he's just established he can't do anything to an Anvat. And his next thought is kill him. And then, obviously, he then realizes how stupid that was. And yeah, I don't know. I just think it's like a funny little bit that puts you in his shoes quite well. The tone is a little bit off because there's bits where, like, immediately after the comedy of that bit, there's bits where, like, he's panicked and sort of wrung out and emotionally frayed, and it doesn't quite work together. But I don't know how to fix that. That will be a very, very much later down the road sort of thing. I do like, for like a character motivation type side of things, that Farland starts by asking some questions like, what would you do? Where would you go? How would you live? And this is in the hopes that Cade gives a sufficient answer. If Cade had said, I'm an exceptional hunter, I can live off the land, or if he had basically explained a way that he could have survived in the world, Farland could have abandoned him with a free conscience. And unfortunately, Cade gives a shitty answer, and it's obvious that Cade can't help himself. So Farland's like, well, okay, then I'm either inadvertently killing another kid or I help him. The bit where Cade says, like, had he meant to say, I won't kill a child again, it's kind of, it seems like Cade is the hint that maybe that's what Farland is saying, like, subtextually, is not really in place. And so it just seems like Cade's like saying this out of nowhere, I guess. And then he goes on to say, have you had this argument with yourself before? Have you lost it before? So I'm not really sure, like, obviously, not obviously, that's the problem. But basically the idea of this line is that Cade's wondering if Farland's been tasked with killing a child before, and he's had this internal debate on should I do it or should I not, and he's lost, and he has killed the kid. Ergo, is he going to lose this argument again and kill Cade? And I don't know if that, like, if it's clear enough what's actually going on in that bit, but maybe you guys can tell me. And then it sort of happens again at the end where the idea is, so for example, he says, why would you help me? And then he wonders, why would you help me? He had said why, but Cade couldn't process it all. Was it a trap? He doesn't need to trap you, you idiot. He could just squash you like a very unintelligent bug if he wanted. So that's, again, like, I sort of worry that I'm making assumptions on what the reader would understand of the situation.
So in the situation, the implied sort of what's going on is Kay's asked, why would you help me? It's known by the reader that Farlan has already said why he would help him. Cade can't process it, and because he can't process it, he wonders, is this some sort of trap? And then he realizes he doesn't need to trap you. He's an Anvat. He could just kill you. And then Farlan responds to all of this by frowning in confusion and saying, I just told you why. And then saying, you're not too bright, are you? And then Cade gets defensive and says, look, I'm not stupid. It's just a lot to take in. Okay. And so there's a lot there that's implied, I guess. And I don't know if that's I don't know if I'm undervaluing a reader's intelligence and they would just get it just by looking at it, or if it's way too confusing, or if a reader would get it if I just tweaked a little bit. So yeah, got to work on that. Something very important that I almost fucking forgot was basically this chapter may be completely removed and just converted into a conversation. Basically, I was thinking that it might be smart to have Cade, when he's at his grandfather's grave, to just stay there and wait to die. Because it serves a couple of functions. One, it means that Farlan isn't... Sorry, it serves a function of meaning that rather than the travel going from Cade's home to halfway towards the city, and then back to Cade's home, and then back to the city, which is kind of very unelegant and just backwards and forwards, and it sort of feels like if you're moving away from the city that we would just establish that we're going towards, and then you get back home, and then you tell the reader once again, okay, now we're going to go back to the city that we just fucking left. I think that'll be really annoying. And coming back to the home, I don't know if it really serves any purpose. And two, the fact that Cade might just wait to die really sells, I think, the idea that he really hates himself. And so I'm thinking that maybe, when Farlan turns up, he was waiting to die, but then, when confronted with immediate, you're about to die, he sort of panics and begs Farlan not to kill him, and then the same conversation can still happen, but just, without having this whole leaving the grave of his granddad to go home and then have this second encounter with Farlan in their home, which basically there's all that would be removed, but everything would stay. It would just be moved around a bit. The only thing I lose, I guess, is slight bits of progression in the weather system, because basically there's a storm currently rolling in, which will later be relevant because it's going to start really coming down and it's going to be important. And a bit of world building around his house, the sculptures in the doorway or Farlan's knickknacks and things, which is a little bit sad to see. The in the previous chapter, I think there were moments where Cade was all of the things that are here are the same as they were before, but because my granddad's dead, it's different now, even though nothing's changed at home. Which I think is a really cool idea, which is a shame that it's gone, but I think for the sake of the rest of the story, it's kind of important. And again, I do like the idea that this also sets up quite clearly, Cade says, what the hell are we going to do? How are you going to help me? And then he says, well, you're going to come with me. We're going to find my Arnrapt. And it's known that the Arnrapt is in the city. So, we're going into the fortress city. We're going to find your Arnrapt. And it gives the reader, I think, a very good idea of where we're going and what we're doing. Which I think is important. I don't really know because, like I said, not a professional writer, just some fucking idiot. So, well, yeah.
So that's it. So thanks for listening. Cheers.